Woman Who Chat is sponsored by Grow Radio. Grow Radio is an online radio station dedicated to bringing you a different podcast on the hour every hour. I'm proud that Woman Who Chat is played on Grow Radio every Tuesday at 3 p.m. and Friday at 8 a.m. and to be part of their podcasting community. If you want to listen to the station, explore their shows, get your podcast onto Grow Radio, and check out many of the blogs to improve your podcasting skills. So head over to growradio.uk today. Welcome to Woman Who Chat, and today I'm chatting to Jacky Wood, who is a menopause champion and Tropic ambassador. Hello, Jacky.
Hello, good morning, Sandra.
It's great that you're here, and we're going to talk about menopause a little bit later because it's a really hot topic. But first, I want to know how you got into doing what you currently do. So give us a bit of background, Jacky.
It's an interesting one. So it goes back quite a long way, Sandra. When I had my own perimenopause and then menopause, I had a very difficult time. But at that time, there was very little information about, I'm going back quite a few years, and there just wasn't the outpouring of information and people really wanting to come forward to help other people. And so there's all this information out there now. When I was going through mine, I didn't know where to look. There was none. I didn't even know what search terms to use. I had no idea. In fact, I thought I was going through it on my own. I thought I must have felt like the worst in the world who ever went through perimenopause. And that was when I actually reached the point where I knew it was perimenopause. So it took me a while to get there. So for a good 10 years, probably a bit more, I was doing everything wrong. I was eating the wrong things. I wasn't exercising. I was in an unhappy relationship, an unhappy job. You name it, it was happening. What that has actually done has turned out to be a gift for me. Because although I reached a time where I did want to check out, I didn't want to be around anymore, I changed my life. And it's only looking back, I see what steps I took to change my life. But if somebody had said to me at the time, you've got to do this and this, I'd have thought that's just impossible for me right now, that I can't do it. But if I had been with me back then, knowing what I know now, I'd have seen the steps much more clearly to take. Mm. So as I came out of that, I sort of rebalanced, everything rebalanced in my mind, in my body. I got very spiritual as well, which hadn't happened to me before. It's surprising how many perimenopausal women find their spirituality. It's interesting. And so different people came into my life. So there were more women in my life, for one thing. And I found that they were lovely company. We had fun together. It was a much warmer existence for me. And then I just started to soak up all this information. And as it came more forth, I was soaking it up more. So I sort of became a sponge. And I thought, I just don't want anybody to feel like I did or feel isolated and afraid and alone, because there's no need for that now, wonderfully. So that's kind of what that did for me, and that's why I got going. Long answer, short question.
That's okay. And you've actually, you're qualified in this, aren't you? You are licensed to deliver this support.
Yes, yeah. So there's a global company called the Menopause Experts Group, and it's founded by Dee Murray. And for about 20 years, she's been a powerhouse to scream the information out there and get as many people involved as possible. And she appoints licensees, so champions, to join her and use the branding, which is what I'm doing. And she trains us. So we get ongoing training all the time. We get lots of support and resources. And so that means now that I can actually accredit people with CPD points. I can go into companies and train them, and they actually get the menopause approved logo from MEG, which is great for them as well. And it allows me to go in with the training and the information, the knowledge and the experience that I've now got to really help them support their colleagues that are going through the transition, as it were.
Yeah. Menopause, I remember when I went through it, it was a taboo subject. It wasn't talked about. It was something that just happened. And I didn't really think much about it. I remember going along to my doctor and saying, am I going through the menopause? Because I was only 40 at the time. They went, no, you're far too young. You're far too young. And I went back at sort of 50 and said, am I going through the menopause yet? And they did a blood test and they went, oh, you've been through it. You've had it. Now, I was very lucky in that I didn't suffer anything. Or maybe I did looking back, but I just wasn't aware. I didn't get the traditional. I think that is because, and I'm going to be open here, I think that's because I had endometriosis from when I was 15. I had a most terrible journey.
Yeah, you would.
Almost going through menopause has been a huge relief.
Yes.
With no additional support, no HRT, nothing, and I've been very lucky. But I do remember, at the start when I thought, oh, could this be menopause? There were some signs there, but there was no support there. So there was nobody I could ask. This is a huge step forward in what you're delivering, and a bit of an eye-opener for women that are now, because you can go through menopause at any age.
You can go through it at any age. Obviously, the younger you are, the rarer it gets, the younger the age group. But actually, 1 in 100 women can go through it in their 30s. And that's a lot. That makes it very common. But because we don't expect to be going through it, we're not looking for the connection. So we might get the signs. We might even think that it's just an age thing, or if we've had some poor health, we might attribute it to that as well. But we need to encourage more healthcare practitioners to think the hormone route, because that seems to be the missing link. A lot of the research is showing now far more links between certain conditions and hormone fluctuations or hormone decrease. But that's only just coming to light. So there's still an awful lot of the public and the healthcare professionals who don't immediately think about that link. But it's quite important, I think, that we do, so that when we perhaps go to the doctor, we might be able to say, look, do you think it might be this? Because there are a lot of guidelines out there. There's a lot for healthcare professionals that they can do the research on, and they can find out if there's anything going on out there. And so if it's possible, that women could become more aware themselves, then it empowers them. So when they do go to see a doctor or a nurse or somebody that's got a specialism in menopause, they can actually offer their side of things. So I think it's important that we empower ourselves with that knowledge. There are so many conflicting research issues out there, but at least something's happening. That's the main thing.
So let's dig down a little bit, because I've always associated menopause with hot sweats and irritability. And they're probably the things that, the hot flushes, sat there. Fortunately, as I say, I didn't experience that. But what other signs could we be looking out for? What are the things? I know it's a non-exhaustive list, but
yes.
What should people look out for?
They used to say that there are 34 signs of menopause, but I think, as you say, it's just got grown and grown, because obviously it's different for everybody. And because estrogen is our operating system hormone, it basically affects every cell in the body. And we've got about, 50 trillion at the last count. So if we are depleted in certain hormones, and it's not always just estrogen, then something can happen anywhere in the body. So you might get your feet burning. You might get an aching elbow. You might get up one morning like I did and think, oh my God, I need a hip replacement. You might start getting blurred vision. Your teeth might become loose. You might get itchy skin. You might forget your friend's name. You might decide that you don't want to get out of bed one morning. You might get terrible thirst. It's just, you name it, if you can think of it, it could possibly be due to your fluctuating hormones. So there are kind of sets of symptoms, if you will. They're physical, they're cognitive, they're psychological. So the physical ones, obviously, where you feel pains and aches and muscles and cramps and everything. And psychological would be where you're getting anxious, you're getting fearful, perhaps depression comes in, maybe you get a little bit worried about what people are thinking about you, all those kinds of things can go on. And then cognitive, where you literally can't remember where you left your keys, and you can't perhaps retain information as well as you used to. But I never ever want to give the message that menopause is the most awful thing that's ever going to happen, because like you, Sandra, you're one of the 75% basically of women that kind of sailed through it. Now, I've got two sisters and they hardly noticed it happening. Mine was just the opposite. And so although we've come out of the same pot, you know, it can be very different, although your mum is probably a fairly good indicator. But for 25% of women, they notice it. And for about 5% of those 25%, they really notice it. But in the main, I would say that every woman, once they become aware and once they empower themselves with some knowledge and get some help, you know, just sort of say, help me, I'm here, and need that support, is going to get their way through it without too much issue. I'm not denying the fact that a lot of women do have a really tough time, but the longer you leave it, the more there is to deal with. So it's quick, there's a change in me, what am I going to do about it? You know, I'm all for, what can we do for ourselves, really?
Interesting you say about the hereditary aspect, and I know you said you were different to your sisters, but I mirrored my mother's journey exactly.
Wow.
Yeah, to the year.
Yeah.
You
Incredible.
know, which is interesting because it was her that said to me, you go and get another blood test because I think you've been through the menopause. And it was, you know, yeah, you know, that going at 50 and finding out I'd gone through it. And she's like, that was like just like me. And yeah.
And it's nice that you can have that conversation with your mum, actually, because a lot of people I speak to say, well, you know, my mum never spoke about it. Excuse me, she's passed away now. Or, oh, my mum would never speak about it to me. You know, I only just got information about periods from her. But excuse me, just as an aside, my mum was 43 when she passed away. And she actually took her own life 3 months after I was born. And my perimenopause started at 43. Now, my godmother, who brought me up, pardon me, said, oh, your mum was going through the change when she had you.
Wow.
So that I think there is a I think I was mirroring my mum. My two sisters didn't for some reason. So it's an interesting one, isn't it, really?
It is, you know, and you say that and you know, the feelings you were feeling, there is support there now for that, whereas your mum must have been so desperate that she thought no other way out, because she probably didn't know what was happening to her.
No, absolutely. And of course, she'll have got postnatal depression, I would imagine, on top of that. So, and PND is also hormonal. You know, they're identifying so many connections now with so many conditions after pregnancy. And in fact, when you think about puberty, periods, pregnancy, perimenopause, all the P's, postmenopause, it's all hormonal. And everything in between is being affected by those hormone changes.
Is it something you can have a conversation with somebody about, make them aware, or do they need to have medical intervention?
Well, that's a really interesting one, you know, because I've got a client at the moment. She did try HRT quite a while ago, and she said, I think I started to feel better after about 3 months, but it was so difficult to get an appointment at the doctor's, I gave it up. But now she isn't having medical support with added estrogen. She's finding a lot of other things coming up. So she's emotionally quite low at the moment. And she hasn't got that resilience that she once had. Now, HRT is great for some women, and some women don't want to go on HRT or can't go on HRT. Very few can't, they're saying right now. But with HRT, a lot of people that take it think that's going to be the magic pill. That's it, I'm going to be fine. That's not always the case either, because as we should do through our lives, we really need to look after ourselves. And to be honest, because our bodies change so much during the menopause transition, we really need to start looking after ourselves much, much more to future-proof our future decades. You know, 100 years ago, in our mid-50s, most of us had gone. And menopause was around about the same time, but now we're living until our late 80s on average. So we've got decades ahead of us, estrogen deficient, actually. So if we don't have HRT, and that's everybody's choice, then we've got to take care of our bodies in ways that really matter and give us that support and that strength going forward.
Oh, Jacky, you're talking to me. I feel as if my broken bones maybe.
Oh,
I think I'm just clumsy, but no, it's true. And I do eat very differently to how I ate 10, 20 years ago. I do exercise differently. I'm very conscious of what I put in my body is what I'm going to, is going to help me get from day to day. And I get a good night's sleep. And I think sometimes, and I know that's very hard for women sometimes in menopause because hot sweats and blushes, but I do get my 8 hours every night. And I need that.
That is going to stand you in so much good stead. Research on sleep is just coming out of every crack you can imagine. It actually affects everything about your life, and it also affects your future years. So for you, that's probably the best thing that you could be doing. I mean, obviously your diet and your movement and everything, and also the way you feed your brain is fantastic too. And so sleep is just going to support all of that. I think probably sleep is one of the first things that everybody should think about, because that affects our hormone production as well. Yeah. Therefore affects weight and, well, mood, everything.
I've always loved my sleep. My mum's always loved to sleep as well, and she's 92 this year. So I'm hoping.
Oh, well.
I'm hoping that I follow her in that respect as well.
You will, I'm sure. That's great. Great.
Longevity is in her side of the family. It's been fantastic chatting to you about this, Jacky. And we need to come back and we need to have another chat and another podcast and whatever. I always ask my guests if they could give one piece of advice or a top tip to the audience. What would that be? What would be yours?
Oh, put yourself first. As women, whatever your situation, it's very rare for me to hear that a woman says, yeah, I always put myself first. My own needs come first. Put yourself first. And it's so important that you value yourself enough to get yourself back into balance again, and not just to suck it up and get on with it, So put yourself first. That's my massive big tip.
Big echo on that. Big echo. Sometimes we forget, don't we? We forget to put ourselves first, and we shouldn't feel guilty for doing it.
No, absolutely. In fact, it's the most selfless thing we can do, because if we're happy, then that means that everyone else around us is going to be happy as well. So that's the best gift you can give to people. And if you're strong, then you can actually carry on being that support to the people around you without depleting your own energy supplies or anything else.
Thank you, Jacky. Well, today I've been chatting to Jacky Wood, menopause champion and tropic ambassador. Jacky will pop all your links in the show notes so that people can follow up and get in touch with you.
Thanks, Sandra. I've really enjoyed. You got me on my favourite subject.
That's great chatting to you.
Oh, thank you.